Learn the most empowering hiring techniques. Land the most desirable talent. Launch your company towards massive success. This is the Higher Power Radio Show with your host, Rick Gerard.
Let's talk about building an advisory board. I think we would all agree that having strong advisors and mentors in your corner brings huge benefits to every organization. Not just as sound advice in making business decisions, but also providing introductions and bringing credibility to the business. So when is the right time to build your advisory board? Well, the answer is as soon as you find the right people who will help. This means before you hire your first employees. Building an advisory board, much like building company values, is often an activity to do later. But guess what? Later is too late. It's like pouring a foundation after the house has been built. So investing the time to build a board before things get too crazy is the smartest way to ensure that the decisions that you make are solid enough to bring the business to its full potential. I'm Rick Gerard, and welcome to the Higher Power Radio Show. We help entrepreneurs and executives win the strongest people by sharing insights from top-performing rebel entrepreneurs, game changers, and industry leaders, like our guest today, Miss Coco Brown. Now, Coco is the founder and CEO of Athena Alliance. Athena has helped thousands of leaders grow and advance their executive careers and has brought over 400 women to corporate boards from growth stage private companies to name brand public companies. Coco has personally worked with hundreds of top leaders, CEOs, and boards to evolve modern leadership. She's served on 10 commercial and nonprofit boards and advisory boards and has led two notable companies, Taos, which was acquired by IBM, and now Athena. She is part of NASDAQ's Governance Insights Council and is often called on to share guidance to the evolving focus and breadth of responsibility within modern boardroom, which is what makes Coco the perfect expert for today's topic. Coco, welcome to the Higher Power Radio Show today.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you. This is like really good timing for me because it's something I've been doing. So I'm kind of picking your brain here because I've been building out my advisory board in my company, InterTrue, that we're building out. This is really timely. So thank you for being on the show. So we're going to talk a little bit about when to build your board of advisors. And then we're going to talk about how to leverage your advisors through your investment cycles and how to actually create the most momentum for you as a business. Sound like a plan?
Yep.
So let's talk a little bit about the challenge. I find that, as I mentioned in the opening, that this is one of those things like building your board of advisors. So, well, I'll get to that when I get to it. Kind of like building your core values. But I would probably venture to guess that you think that's a bad idea.
Yeah, I mean, it sort of comes from an amalgam of different experiences I've had over all of the years, both in helping companies build boards or build advisory boards, but also in talking to CEOs who are looking back and wishing that they had done something sooner because they're feeling a little bit more hamstrung than they'd like to be, or they're feeling like they didn't make as much of a competitive advantage. They didn't take that competitive advantage and build it up around themselves early enough. Anything from, wow, and now I have to build my formal fiduciary board and I don't have a broad set of people that I trust that I can pull from for nominations for that independent role, to, gosh, I never even thought about how vital an advisory community, even if you don't call it a board, but an advisory community could be to opening doors and helping shape my product and helping me hire the right people, et cetera.
Yeah, and I would imagine that, well, at least for me, I mean, a lot of the bad decisions that have been made prior to that point probably could have been avoided by just having somebody in your corner who's providing that ear.
Yeah, absolutely. And most people, I think most people are willing to help you, but I think sometimes we think that we can't ask for much of their time, or we sort of use up the narrow bit of contacts that we have, and we don't explore bigger sets of contacts that could be even more valuable and provide more perspective. So, we spend more time sort of thinking internally about who will be my first hire, and then what's my second hire, and then how's that organization structure going to work? And we don't think about it in terms of the structure around us individually as founder.
No, we don't. And actually that goes into core values of the company as well, too, which is something that I'm a big proponent of, is that, and it doesn't take that much time to sit down and kind of do the work to figure out like who your dream advisors would be and reach out to them. And what's interesting is that if you don't ask, You're never going to get a yes, but you'd be amazed on how many people are open to helping out.
A lot of that has to do with also just thinking through what help you need, like if you articulate it, you write it down, and God, I really love to talk to somebody who looks like this, then you can go find them. But if you never do that, you're not going to find them.
And, it's not that difficult to hop on LinkedIn and find people
No.
or work through your network of people that you know and find out who they know and get names and introductions. I mean, I think it's so critical even when you're hiring too. We get into reactive mode like, oh crap, we've got money, now we need to hire people, as opposed to, all right, let's start planning this out and having conversations with people before we need to hire them so that when we need to hire them, pull the trigger, we've got them on board.
Exactly. And also in just in today's economic climate, particularly with tech companies or tech entrepreneurs, they suddenly have gone from their funders telling them, here's a bunch of money, go hire, right? To wait a minute, dial back and make sure you have 24 to 36 months of runway, which can feel like whiplash, particularly to younger entrepreneurs who've never been through this before. And then, so really having a good set of advisors around you is it's a very economical way of kind of attacking some of the things that you need to keep moving forward for, even if you can't hire right now.
So, why is having a strong board important to a company?
Well, I think about it in sort of an evolutionary sense, and first of all, if you never go for outside funding, if you're always self-funded, then the board is going to consist of you and whoever else you founded the company with and hold 100% of the shares with, right? That's going to be the board. But eventually, if you do take outside funding, you're most likely going to end up with an expanded fiduciary board that it consists of some of those funders as well as you. So then there's this more formalized structure that happens to you if you haven't thought about it in advance. So that's kind of that's sort of hold those two truths. You may or may not go for funding, and it may change what I'm saying. But regardless, if you're a young meaning new, right? You're newly founding a company, and you are a company of one or two, you've got a product, you've got a thesis, you've got a sense of where your market is, and what their problem set is. You have a wish list of your first, pilot customers. You have these things that are really well served if you can tap into the market at or above your level to get great guidance. People, at first you start with people who are just going to tell you flat out how it is because they know you and they care about you. And so they'll tell you the truth. That's a dumb idea. That product will never work over here. Those kinds of things. And that sort of loose affiliation, at a certain point, I challenge you to stop just thinking about them as your friends or the people introduce you to, and start thinking of them really strategically. Like, okay, I have this little ecosystem over here of the best talent I can find around my problem set and the product that I'm trying to solve, or the science or the technology or whatever. And then over here, and sort of where I think my vertical is, the market I'm going after, the segment of the market, et cetera. And over here, maybe some of the challenges that I perceive from sort of like a what's already been done before and how do we do it different, but different kind of segments. You start looking for people beyond your network and really trying to expand out beyond your network so that you have a great ecosystem to pull from. Because coming back to the why do I need this, what's the benefit, it ultimately it gets you in a position, as we were saying earlier, of having a pool of talent to choose from when you're choosing an independent director, or you're choosing your chief operating officer or your chief technology officer, or these really critical roles.
That is so very true. And I feel like, too, when you have good advisors that you built around you, you're putting yourself also in a position where those people could potentially transfer into the business, or exactly like they can help you to drive data driven decisions as opposed to just going with your gut and making those mistakes that ultimately you're going to make, but you don't need to make.
Yeah. Another thing actually that is interesting, I was talking to a CEO not long ago, and he was saying, I really want to bring diversity onto my board. And now he's in this place, he's post series A, series B, something like that. And he's got, a couple board members that are from the top VCs that have funded him, and a couple from him and his founder. And he has a pool of people he wants to potentially bring in on his board, but he's saying, "Look, I also want diversity," however you look at that statement. But he has nobody to draw from, and the biggest issue he had on diversity wasn't around, like, "I don't want a woman on my board," or, "I don't," was around trust. "I already trust these other people. I already know these other people really well, so I really wanna bring them on my board." So, a part of that too is, like, developing an ecosystem of trust beyond just the core network that's comfortable. The more you think about that ecosystem around you, the more you build diversity into your candidate pool, whether it's for, top roles or for board members.
That's such a great point. All right, you're listening to the Higher Power Radio Show. I'm your host, Rick Girard. And for our podcast listeners, we're going to take a quick educational moment from our sponsors.
Hey, everybody, I'm Lori Rudiman. What are you doing? Working? Nah, you're listening to a podcast about work, and that barely counts. So while you're at it, check out my show, Punk Rock HR, now on the Work Defined Network. We chat with smart people about work, power, politics, and money. Are we succeeding? Are we fixing work? Probably not. Work still sucks, but tune in for some fun, a little nonsense, and a fresh take on how to fix work once and for all.
Hey, check out stridesearch.com. There you'll find additional content and resources, and your link to finding your copy of Healing Career Wounds. Let it be your company's secret weapon to landing the strongest people. Our guest today is Coco Brown, and we're discussing building your advisory ecosystem. We just talked a little bit about why it's important for you and your company. Now we're going to delve into how to do it. So this is the fun part, Coco. Walk us through how I should personally build out my board of advisors.
Well, so the very first thing, it's kind of like what they say about, like, the first thing is to admit you have a problem.
Yeah.
The very first thing is the mindset, right? That it's to go, "Oh, wait a minute. I had never thought about that before," right? And so now that you've got that in your mind and you think, "Okay, well, that's interesting. As much as I think about the internal team, I'm going to think about my external team." So then I would sort of imagine, that there's a table and you're sitting at this table and there's 5 seats around the table, and just ask yourself, like, if I could put someone in that seat and someone in that seat and someone in the seat over here, how would I define those seats? Like, who would I love to talk to? And some of those are going to be like, "Oh, I just, every once in a while I want to be able to call that person," versus, "Here's a conversation I'd like to be able to have, once a quarter or every other month, or at least for this year while I'm trying to solve this part of my business problem." But sort of chunk your business problems down into cycles, into phases, into the kinds of things that you haven't yet solved, and start defining a little bit of, the persona of who you want to have relationships with you, to circle around you, and how often you want to meet with them, and whether or not you want them in a structure that's just you to them, or gosh, it'd be great if there were 3 of them and me, or 3 of them and my CTO and me. But that's what you want to do, is start just modeling it, just sort of shaping that a little bit for yourself.
So thinking about, hey, like if I were to build a dream team, who would that be?
Yeah.
And who are those people that I'd want around the table? And you know what? It seems to me like we probably aim too low on this one.
Yeah.
So we think, like, I'd love to have some name brand person on the board, but I would imagine most people go, well, no, I'll just call my friend Ralph and see if he'll do it.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing is too, if you are at a point where it's a fiduciary board now, like, as opposed to an advisory board that doesn't, you can take their advice or not as you like, right? But as soon as they're the fiduciary board, there's a different relationship with those people. Those people have an obligation to protect the business and the interests of the customers. It's not just you, right? So when you think about your advisors, you can think very selfishly about you. And how many of those do you want always selfishly just for you, as opposed to the people on your board? Yeah. And then sometimes also when you do get to a place where you are building a fiduciary board, if you have enough to pick from, you can say, "Oh, this person I really trust. They've got my back. They understand what I'm in this for. They understand why I have the exit strategy I have. They're going to, so I'm going to suggest that we consider them for this independent role that is between, me and the other owners and the funders. Founders and funders need the independent role to kind of break the tie sometimes, or be the navigator between the two. And so that's, a piece of that. So think of that dream team as people I'm going to build trust with over time, people that are going to add the right kinds of guidance to me over time, people who've seen around the corners that I think I'm going to have to navigate around. So that how piece is really just to envision it, imagine it, right? Start drawing it out. And then the second thing is then, so it's sort of like know you need it, start envisioning it, and then just go out and start finding those people. They're not that hard to find, and one will lead you to another. You'll reach out to one and they'll say, "Oh, well, I don't really have the bandwidth for it, but so and so over here is really great at that." Or you ask, "Who else do you know?"
Let me back up a little bit. So you've recognized, okay, hi, I'm Rick. I'm an entrepreneur. I have a problem. I don't have a board of advisors, right? First step. But it seems to me like you need to have some sort of structure or framework that can help me engage a person so they don't just think I'm some sort of yutz calling them up going, hey, I'm selling a widget. I got my shit together, so to speak, and I'd like to talk to you about helping out. Like, so what would be that, I don't know, that structure, that framework, or what would be that piece that I need to put in place?
I think the early days you literally sneak up on people. And I mean that. I'll give you an example. When I first
Tag, you're it.
when I first started Athena, I approached a woman who I knew, well, but not super well. And I was still trying to get to know her, but she was at the time the CIO of New Relic. And she was on a couple of boards. And I said, gosh, every time I talk to you, like I'm taking out my notebook. You know, those people, like every time you talk to them, you're like, I'm taking notes, and just, can I talk to you periodically? Like, and about these kinds of things. Right. And then over time, that becomes something that they're more invested in because so much of their thought has gone into it. They're invested in your success, right? And they're like, and then you say, well, could I formalize this a little bit? Could you become a formal advisor for me? And then it's just like, I want to put you on decks and put you on my website. It's that simple. All right. And then, but we're still doing the same thing we're doing right now. And then you start accumulating those, and you've got 5 of them. And then at some point, you might step back and you might say, you know what? I'd love to get them together with me. And so then it's like, I'm bringing my advisors together as an advisory board. And we're going to meet once a quarter and I'm going to give us different things we're going to tackle. So, like for my advisory board, I just spent we actually are getting together once a month at Athena. And I spent 2 months, I just kicked it off. I spent 2 months getting them really socialized to what it is Athena is supposed to be. Here's what it's all about. Here's what I'm selling. Here's how I want it to feel. This next month, they have homework assignment. Go check out everything you see out there, which is largely the website, right? Are we what I say we are? And then we're going to come back and we're going to talk as a group about what they see. Is it what I'm saying, or do I need to do some things differently? Which is great because they're on the outside. They're not living in the trees day to day. They can see the forest, right? So that's where you don't like immediately say, hey, I want to start a formal. Sometimes you do, but you're much bigger usually by that point. But if you're smaller, then you sneak up on them. You just build those and then you create the formal. But you should be thinking about that structure along the way. Like it's going to be one to one, then it's going to be, one to one but many, and then I'm going to bring them together. And then maybe now I have my pool that I can potentially draw from for some more. Maybe these sets of advisors become like a bigger set of advisors or a more serious set of advisors, and they get some stock, and then maybe they get a stipend, and then maybe they become board member feeders, right? But that's the structural thought.
So what I'm pulling from you is that it is a process. And so you want to take your time with it. You want to identify those people, reach out to them, start developing the relationship, and kind of create like a nurture campaign where you're like bringing them in slowly into the process. Once they get emotionally invested, that's when you hit them with, hey, let's formalize this.
Yeah, you can even, I've done things like, I do, and I've also seen this in other people as well. Like, excuse me, you might send out a quarterly, personal Rick Gerard newsletter, just to my core group of people who have helped me along the way and care deeply about what I'm building here. I just want to give you an update. Here's our successes and our wins, and our next challenges. So you're building more and more of a connection to you and to what you're building, and a lot of times that's all they need. They need to know that what they're giving you in their time and their advice has a has a a beneficial impact that they can also then leverage to bask in the glow of, right?
Now, at what point do you say, okay, let's formalize this, and then here's kind of like our advisor equity package? Like those are things you can pull off of Combinator, wherever you get them, right? But at what point do you need to feel comfortable with somebody, or does somebody need to feel comfortable with you for you to ask them to formalize the relationship?
Well, so I think there's sort of two things. One is if it's an individual person and you're going to count on their leverage, you're going to count on their social, or political collateral, right? You're going to count on them. For example, you are putting them in the decks and you might actually call on them to be a part of the roadshow in some way or validation or whatever. Then you might want to say, hey, and I want to give you something formally for this. You might also decide that you're going to formalize and create a formal advisory board because you've gotten to a certain size where now that's what you want to do. And so what is the give get? Then you have to think about the give get, right? Like, well, I'm going to want us to get together once a month and I'm going to, assign you some homework. And so what do I give you in return for that? Is it stock? Is it a cash stipend? Is it discounts on the product, depending on what it is that you have or, lifetime membership, like what do you have to offer? It can be a variety of things. So that's really up to you. I've seen all sorts of structures work from a 10K annual stipend to 10,000 shares of stock and whatever that means, like I've seen all sorts of different structures.
And it seems to me like it's really dependent upon what's important to that advisor, like what they value, that give gap. Everybody's always concerned about the what's in it for me.
Yeah.
And somebody might be just really happy with being able to use the product for free for the lifetime. And then somebody might be like, hey, look, I definitely want the equity, or I want to be able to draw some cash from this at some point.
Yeah, I think you want to once you get to a state where you are formalizing, and there's 5, 6 people or around that table, you kind of want to be consistent. What one gets, they all get. Because they will talk to each other at some point when they start to become friends. And also it's just, even if they didn't talk to each other, it's just good practice. It's easier for you to manage. It's a good idea.
You've got kind of a framework. What about the structural components? Is there anything that I think you had 3 pieces that we discussed about how you can leverage that structure?
I sort of talked about it a little bit in that, first it starts one to one, your individual relationships, you're pulling on close connections. Then you're going to lesser known, they may be better known public figures, but lesser known to you. So then you're creating more of like this potentially like a set of think tanks around you, and you're looking, for sure, I would say start thinking about diversity, mixed groups. This is where you can start to get in people from different kinds of backgrounds is incredible, and people from different kinds of regions and different industries potentially. And then you might be formalizing, mostly keeping it one to one still, but having maybe we'll get all of this type together on a quarterly basis and all of that type together on a quarterly basis. And then when you go to the formal advisory board, I've seen it, strictly around one. Like I think about the business as always having 3 to 5 key imperatives that it's working on. These are the things that are going to take you to the next milestone on, take you from 1 million to 10 million or 10 million to 100 million. What are those things? You might form an advisory board around the one thing. We're doubling down on this vertical. We're really trying to solve this problem in the product. Our go to market strategy. So then in that case, it's a group of people that are all prudentially alike. And so then, what are you looking for from them? Formalize that around them, all CMOs, all chief technology officers, et cetera. But as you get closer and closer to formalizing a real board, if you're going to do that, or you want that benefit, but you're not actually going to create a fiduciary board, think eventually about creating an advisory board that's a mix of roles. Like take your C-suite and build your C-suite, but 2 years out from where you are, so your advisors, yeah, your advisors represent the, 50 million mark when you're at 10 million right now, but then there's people that your C-suite can tap into and get advice from. And so structure that. And then the last thing I would say around structuring is think about cadence, how often, and think about value and consistency from one meeting to the next. Like, in the first quarter, are we going to be talking about the plans for the year and the growth strategy? In the second quarter, are we going to be talking about the product and, the product roadmap? In the third quarter, but create something that gives that advisory board a sense of consistency, and also building on working through problems and initiatives for the business once you've started building it more to look like your C-suite.
That's great advice. I find that most of our audience are probably trying to go from that 0 to $1 million or that 1 million to 5 million range. I love the fact that you're looking at the C-suite for the future and engaging them early. That's a great way to proactively recruit your next talent pool. The people are going to hire when you're ready to hire them. That's fantastic. We're getting pretty close on time. Coco, what would be 2 or 3 key takeaways you can give the audience that can plug into their business today?
I think the very first one is start thinking beyond the team you're going to hire. Think to the team that's going to support you personally. I think the second is, as you do that, think competitive advantage. Like, who's out there right now that would, if their association to you would start to give you a competitive advantage. And then the third is just build in advance of your needs. Don't think that this is something you need to do next year. If you think that, then start doing it this year.
Ooh, I love that. All right, Coco, thanks so much for your time investment today, and I want to welcome you to the Higher Power Radio community. What's the best way in which members of the audience can find you, find your company, all that good stuff?
I'm the easiest Coco Brown to find on LinkedIn. I challenge you to tell me that I'm not the first Coco Brown that pops up if you look for me. So that would be one way.
I spelt it wrong the first time, by the way, and so I got it wrong, but...
Oh, you got it. Okay, well, COCO, no A. And then the second is Athena Alliance. So just AthenaAlliance.com. 2 A's in the middle there, AthenaAlliance.com. And we are an ecosystem for executive enablement. So yeah.
And of course, we'll have all that linked in the show notes. I want to thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of Higher Power. A quick thanks to our team, Brian Colburn, Andrea Ballin, and Ayla Gerard. If you're listening to the podcast, please subscribe, review, and share. After all this shows for you, we want to continue to bring valuable content to you week after week. You can join the Higher Power Radio community at Higher, H-I-R-E, Power, P-O-W-E-R, Radio, R-A-D-I-O.com, or you can drop me an email at rickatstridesearch.com. Tune in next Tuesday. Our guest is going to be Payman Tay. He is the founder and president of Visme. I'm your host, Rick Gerard, and you have been listening to the Higher Power Radio Show. Aloha.
Thank you for listening to Higher Power Radio.
Catch our LinkedIn Live show
Every Tuesday at noon, or download the podcast on iHeartRadio, iTunes, YouTube, or your favorite podcast platform.
We appreciate you joining us on Higher Power Radio with your guide to hiring success, Rick Gerard.